Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Yes. Is everyone good? Okay. Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Diego Azuna Clark. I recently arrived from Minnesota. It's wonderful to be here in New York. Yeah. It's a beautiful city, Albany. It's my first time in Albany. Wow. I was shocked at the beauty. Walked around, looked around. It was very nice. This is my co-presenter.
Hi, good morning. I'm Laura Canast. I work closely with Diego, and I am thrilled to be here in Albany. Last night we had the opportunity to sort of, adventure around and look in Albany. It's a beautiful city, so I'm excited to be here this morning and share some great resources with you for the Dream Symposium.
Great. Now, before we start, I wanted to describe myself. Average height, male, light skin color, brown hair with dark brown glasses, like a dark purpley pink shirt with a floral button up underneath and some gray slacks.
So this is Laura. I'm 5'10", I'm pretty tall, white woman with dirty blonde hair that's curly. I'm wearing glasses, and I'm wearing like a wineish, purplish, burgundy, whatever word you want to use, jacket with a little bit of stripes on it and some black pants.
Yeah, so both of us are co-directors for the strategic support, yes, for the National Deaf Center. And so we're very thrilled to be here with you guys. And I just wanted to explain a little bit more about NDC and the purpose of this presentation. This is for job readiness and support deaf people. But before I proceed, the both of us are deaf, and we just wanted to emphasize what deafness means in the scope of things and what deaf community is. That includes deaf, deafblind, deaf disability, hearing loss. It's a huge range. And so, we are focused on the specific group within that community with deafness at its center. So, we want to start early with children. We tend to ask like, oh, when you grow up, what do you want to become? What do you want to do in the future when you become an adult? We tend to do that, right? And see what their dreams are and their aspirations. And so then people will ask, oh, okay, what do you need to do? Like, I want to be a teacher. I want to become a parent. I want to do that. So their parents will support them in accomplishing those goals. But remember, everyone has a different starting point. And so we're here to discuss how we can improve the system at that level to provide those opportunities for networking and for job growth and opportunity and for job satisfaction as well, so that people can meet their goals when it comes to employment. So we also wanted to take this opportunity to do a land acknowledgement, and we want to recognize the land that we're on. We have two different tribes that are represented here in Albany, the Mohawk and the Mohenkonak, which they've had this land, before the European settlers arrived. So along the Hudson River, yes, and going towards west, they came over to discover this new world. But we want to recognize that we are on their land and recognize the opportunities and the resources that have been utilized from this land that they provided to us. So the National Deaf Center, what exactly is that? So we're funded under the Department of Education, the Office of Education, OSEP. And basically, we just want to share information. There's a lot of data and research. And so we condense all of that into one place and provide access to everyone who needs that support, with deaf people especially. And so our goal is to provide that equitable access to all people for work, straight from high school, their transition plan as well, and their journey. So networking is very important. Information sharing is important, and research. We definitely want to look forward to continuing those standards of best practice. So these are just a few things that we do. there's a lot of information under each of these tabs. So data and dashboard. Thank you. Um, so we have a lot of information that we pull from, and we collate all of that, and so we put that down. And for the pre-ad services, and we set all of that up, and so then we run with all that information so that we can provide that appropriate service for the consumer. And so as we take all of the information that we collect throughout all that, we can consolidate it, and then we share that with everyone. And we emphasize community involvement as well. So there's different types of communities. We go to different cities, we go to different colleges. All of these people are included in this community. And so it's like, are we the experts? No, we pull from people. They're the experts of their life and their experience. And so we do provide support with services. We see how we can improve the services and the system to accommodate each person as an individual. And I'm going to turn it over to Laura.
So this is Laura. So part of our work at the National Deaf Center is that we have to depend on data, right? So as was described, we have collected data and created a dashboard. And the data helps us to not make assumptions about what the challenges and the gaps are. We have to depend on the data to tell us the story and to understand where the gaps are. And from there, we can move forward and figure out how to address those inequities. And data is a powerful tool without question. It helps us advocate. It helps people who are within decision-making power. It helps planning processes. And that data is why we do what we do at NDC. So I have some numbers. And on your seats, you should have a copy of this brochure. And so that's New York State specifically. If you want other copies, I have some here at the table if you'd like to grab some for your colleagues. And I just want to talk a bit about how we have gotten our data, right? So the data is from the American Community Survey. That's under the US Census Bureau. And typically they do random surveys monthly. They collect data from the communities. However, deaf people, they'll fill them out and they may check, that they have severe difficulties hearing. And that's what's part of the survey as an identification of them being deaf. And so that gives us a starting point, right? That data is not, through and through with every single person in the country, but it helps us start somewhere. And so every year we update our data and our data dashboard that you can find on our website. So I encourage you, when you have the opportunity, to please look at our data dashboard. It's very comprehensive. It drills down on a number of data points. But for now, clearly, because we're here, we're focusing on New York. And so I want to talk briefly a bit about education and then about employment, because they do go hand in hand. So in New York, it's interesting. So New York is the 14th state ranked amongst all the states with a good BA completion rate, right? So it's pretty high. That's great. 14 out of 50. However, on the flip side of that, with employment, New York is 40th. And it doesn't seem to add up, right? So 14th and then 40th. So this is perfect for us to figure out, where are the gaps? Why is the employment outcome so low, right? So hopefully while you're here today and tomorrow and you talk with your colleagues and you go back to work, thinking about how does this data apply to the things that we're doing, and how can we make systems change and advocate in different ways or create different partnerships to lessen the gap? Because I believe you also want these numbers to change, right? Yeah. So this is a bit more on education. on this slide here. And I'm sorry, the screen is so small and I apologize for that, but I'll describe the slide here. So in the teal bar that's on the left, it shows 23.7%. And that represents deaf people who graduate with a bachelor's degree. So again, 23.7%. Comparatively to the black line here is hearing people, so not deaf people, it's 42.5%. So clearly there's an inequity there, right, between deaf and hearing people, clearly. I mean, it's also, 19% difference. So, what these numbers tell us is we need to think about how are we working with colleges and universities and trade schools, vocational schools within our areas, right? How are we connecting with them? How can we make sure that deaf students are not only enrolled, but stay enrolled and graduate, right? And at the same time, it's not just about classes, right? It's also about the entire college experience and then also getting career services. So I'm imagining there's folks in this room tied to career services or tied to, how do students get the right resources that they need to utilize everything that college can offer? So a few more quick stats. So 53% of deaf people have completed some college. I would like them to see 100% complete, right? And so that's another way that we can utilize the utilize the data to figure out the barriers. And a bachelor's degree is at 19% completion rate, right? So it's really important that deaf students to know that deaf people with further disabilities face even further barriers or greater barriers throughout their college experience. So shifting to employment. So 51% of deaf New Yorkers have a job, compared to 70% of hearing people that have jobs. And so breaking that down even further, so that 51% for Latina people is 46%. And for Black people, it is 39%, Black deaf people and Latinx deaf people. And for deaf blind people, it's 35%, right? So you're seeing the numbers go down and down and down. And then for a deaf person who has an additional disability, it's 26%. So those categories certainly impact the deaf community and certainly impact deaf people clearly. And admittedly, those numbers are very concerning to me. I think that we need to look even further within those groups to see what are the barriers, right? We have the data at NDC and we have stories from deaf people about the exact barriers. So I encourage you to take a look at our website. We have lots of beautiful stories from people that share their experiences as the experts. So this slide is in regards to wages and earnings, and it's split by gender. So women on the left and men on the right. So hearing women earn about $57,000 a year in New York, while deaf women earn $49,000 a year, right? So clearly a difference. And on the right is men. Hearing men will earn roughly around $65,000 a year, and deaf men earn $61,000 a year. And again, these are all New Yorkers. So you can see the disparity clearly in earnings between deaf and hearing people and by gender. And I can also say, deaf people of color, deaf people who have additional disabilities, deaf people who are blind, it's even further marginalized in these numbers.
So, what do we know about employment barriers for deaf people? That's something I want you to meditate on and think about, and look at what the data actually shows us. So, research does actually show that deaf people truly want to work. They want a job, they want employment, they want to move up in that employment, they want job satisfaction. They don't want to just stay at the basic level 20, 40, 50 years. No, for they want, a job opportunity to look forward to. They want that benefit at the end. So they want financial stability plus more opportunity for growth. Is that happening? Not in many instances. Like Laura had mentioned previously, the employment numbers, there's a huge disparity there. Many people are identified, whether they're women with additional disabilities, et cetera, there's a variety of barriers that they do face when it comes to employment. When we look at these numbers connected to, for example, a deaf person of color and a disability, the increase has not happened. That it's been at the same level, and we need to change that. But when we're looking at the numbers so far, there has not been any improvement in their situation. Now, we saw from the numbers presented by Laura that the employment rates, they're okay, but the education rates are good. But when it comes to transitioning to employment, the numbers take a rapid decline. And that's not just here, it's actually throughout the entire United States. So this is a countrywide issue that we're facing, and there's many different solutions that are available. And so when we look at the information here for our states, we notice that the same solution can apply. So, for example, you have VR services that connect workers to their employment, how they can get the pre-ed opportunities, networking, picking up skills, and getting employment. But how do we do this? We have to look at the system first to see what is happening. They're saying that deaf people aren't ready. Okay, if that's the issue, then what can we do to make them ready? So when we looked at the numbers, we noticed that hearing people, their unemployment rate was 4.7%. And a deaf person's was 4.9%. So it seems like, it's just a 0.2% gap. It's a very small gap, but it doesn't mean that deaf people can't work or, they don't want to work. The biggest barrier we see is the attitude that deaf people are lazy or that they can't work or they don't want a job. They just rather, live off the government. But when you look at the numbers up close, they do actually want to work. But first, they can't find a place of employment that allows them to feel good about waking up early in the morning and going to that job. It's really tough to find that type of job satisfaction. And also the other kind of opportunities, maybe in high school for work readiness, that transition plan, what does that actually look like in practical measures? That transition after you graduate high school, it's like, well, you're on your own. Good luck. I hope you figure it out. That needs to change. That shift in the system is important. And that applies for everyone, especially deaf people. Many of us are aware of these barriers. The data and the research shows that these are factual. But when engaging and talking with members of the community and they're explaining their stories, these are the one top identifiers that come to the fore. These are the issues that are recurring in their situations. It's like, oh, employees say, I want to support the community, the disabled community, but they're not but it's like, oh, I'm not sure if I can help them move up, or their earnings aren't going to be sufficient for sustaining of life, or, maybe in several years they can do something. They kind of put limits on the community and the opportunities for them to have employment growth. And so networking, what does that actually look like for a deaf person? What about in your communities? If a deaf person says, I want more hours, or if I'm interested in this type of professional career or something like that, then it becomes very tough for them. And then you add a disability on top of that, it's even a greater challenge. So how do we resolve these barriers? Well, first, by going and actually engaging with the people that are facing these barriers. Many times people say, oh, I've got a job, and, it's like maybe some specific place that they go and they'll be like, okay, they'll hire me. And so they have a job, but it depends on who you know. It's like, oh, that person's hiring. And so you go. But do these opportunities present themselves often? Maybe, but maybe not. So that's something that we definitely have to think about. Do you provide deaf people with true opportunities and networking so that they can get meaningful and purposeful work that has longevity that they can get to? And it starts early too. It doesn't start after high school, when they're actually in desperate need for something, but start before then. What are you interested in? Encourage those interests and desires. Training, attitude barriers, those are serious. Let's see the next slide. So I'm going to turn it over to Laura and talk about how can we create this shift that is needed.
So this is Laura speaking. Thinking about what can we do to make these changes, right? So if we think about creating job opportunities, right, and early real world work experiences, it has to start much earlier than traditionally has happened. You know, in those early work experiences, you find out what interests you, what's a good fit, what makes sense, right? And by doing that, you're likely to increase long-term employment within that job because the person has the experience and they know it's a good fit. It's not like, trial by error and a couple of jobs and then it just doesn't work out. The next being family expectations and engagement. Families need to motivate their deaf children to go out and work, try different things, get job experiences, have the exploration, do an internship when they're in high school, get a summer job. Just those little things really add up. And that encouragement is so important, and for families to talk with their deaf children about, what opportunities are out there and talk with them about what their interests are. The third being self-determination and confidence, encouraging the self-determination skills, advocacy skills. When a deaf person goes into an interview, how do they handle that interview? How do they disclose their disability? When do they do that? What's the right time for that? All of those things are so important to building that rapport with the employer so they feel ready for work. The fourth thing here is beyond English literacy. Not every job requires proficient English literacy. It's a myth, frankly. Many employers think, I'm not sure if this person can read and write well. It's actually a myth. It's about the skill and the talent for what a person can provide to the work. So it's, have a deaf person talk with the employer. Look at the person's skill. Can they meet the needs of the job? If so, great. And last bullet here, supported employment and career training. Individualized job coaches make a world of a difference. And often we don't have deaf people, we don't have that network or have a deaf job coach, right? To provide some guidance on the job and what does that look like. So supporting that need and early, all of these should be very early and then early in their career training, and could, wherever they're at school, could that provide that career training to really reinforce the future of their career, and not just job skills, but interviewing skills, soft skills, resume skills. I mean, all of those things are part and parcel to getting a job. And could K through 12 systems do that? How much access to deaf children have to these things? And so it's important to think about when we think about systems change. And we have to think about programs with deaf people in mind. And that's an issue we see oftentimes, is that programs are not designed for deaf people, right? So how are we doing this work to sort of step back and think about what can we do to include everyone? So quickly, I just want to share some of our resources with you. So NDC is sponsored by a federal program, so the Department of Education, and all of our resources are free. All of our services are free. You can contact with us for support for free. We have wonderful resources on our website. So a work-based learning. We have this video that's fantastic. So NDC had the opportunity to work with particular schools that provide work-based learning to deaf people. And we saw a huge difference when they offered those programs with deaf students in mind. The one from Idaho that's on the left, they have this food truck, and students, learn how to, create budgets, how to cook, how to serve, how to interact with customers. All those skills are so important that when they transition out of school, they can figure, maybe they want to do something with finance or something in the business world, and so that exposure starts at the food truck. So it was fantastic to see. Another experience that we had, we worked with in a group in Maryland. It was a school to work program, and they first, they do an assessment on the student, they figure out what their interests are, and then they put them within a short-term job. And on that job, they can figure out if they like it or if they don't like it, or if, they want to do something else or something similar. And so that work-based learning opportunities for deaf students is critical. And then the summer camp in Pennsylvania, we were able to connect with, many summer camps now offer, like say a STEM track or whatever different types of track, film camp, engineering track, and so it's another opportunity for deaf students to sort of immerse themselves, and as Diego said, if they're engaged with VR, Voc Rehab, perhaps they can support them in a summer camp to go and get further education, learn more about STEM or engineering or film or whatever that looks like. And so, if you're working with deaf students, I encourage you to think about those opportunities. Let them play, let them try, let them figure out, what job skills work. And then in those instances, they're also able to network. So there's just so many pros, particularly for the summer camp experience. Also on the NDC website, we have a virtual career exploration section, and that includes, developing a resume, interview skills, and we also have one that's called virtual job exploration, and that's to connect with a deaf professional in a variety of fields. And, that deaf professional can tell them about their job, how they navigated system barriers, how they got that job. And so deaf students, can sort of learn from their mistakes or learn from their challenges to think about that when they're going into their own careers. And lastly, some other resources that we have are called, hashtag Deaf Success videos. We have a litany of videos all available on YouTube. And they really run the gamut. We have a college professor talking about their experience. We have some doctors, nurses. We have, a police officer, an artist, a graphic designer, a fashion designer, you name it. We have one person who works in the soil conservation. We have so many wonderful videos, and we're continuously, looking for deaf people so they can share their stories with deaf youth. So they're all available. You're welcome to utilize them, share them, say in your deaf classroom or with your deaf employees as a resource. NDC is very committed to making sure that everything is accessible. So all of our videos have American Sign Language captions and spoken English. So it's accessible to anybody who watches the video. And so on some of your chairs is this placard. We have online courses. So if you want to learn more about how to work with deaf people, that's an online course, free. We have Deafverse. So it's online gaming, and that gaming includes 3 components. The first being developing self-advocacy skills, career exploration, and then exploring which college you would like to go to. So sort of navigating the college pathway, and the questions you should ask about which college you should go to. So again, it's very accessible to everyone, and students can do it themselves. It's self-paced, and again, is free. And they ask questions of the student to pull out some of that critical thinking or that reflection on their own journey as a student and what they want out of a career. So I could go on all day. Please take a look at our website, National Deaf Center.
This is Diego. Thank you, Laura, for summarizing all of that in the NDC and what we do. And I hope it's been really helpful for you attendees here at this Dream Conference to really understand and visualize how you can support deaf people in your communities. So now we're going to go to the second part of our presentation here, which is the panel. So we want to thank Chris for coordinating the participants for our panel. And we, got participants from a variety of different places to see what their models are and providing different services, in their programs in their states, and how their creativity and innovations can help plant seeds so that we can really develop this. So I wanted to start with 3. First, unfortunately, there were 3. First, we had a video that was sent to us, but we have 2 people that are going to be here for the panel, but the one, unfortunately, is not in person, but they will be virtual. So.
And we're looking for Liz, yeah?
Oh, yeah, you can have just a seat at the table.
And I just adjusted the screen a bit so the panelists can see the questions.
Okay, is everyone set up nicely? All right. So the setup is a little bit odd, but we'll figure it out somehow. We'll make it work. So I want everyone to just introduce themselves just briefly, and I'm going to ask you guys to do that on your own. Give us your name, your role, your organization, etc.
Hello, good morning. It's nice to see everyone here. My name is Elizabeth Hill. I'm the Executive Director for the New Jersey Division for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing. We are a division under the Department of Human Services.
I noticed some people are kind of craning their necks to see. Do you mind standing up so that we can all see you?
Do you want me to repeat myself, or are we good?
No, you're fine. Go ahead. Next.
Morning, everybody. My name is Will Pendlebury, and I'm from Vermont. I work for an organization called Higher Ability Vermont. And so that is our vocational rehabilitation. We rebranded to Higher Ability Vermont a couple of years ago. My role is I am a field services manager. And so I oversee our RCD program, our assistive technology program, and a couple of other programs. So I'm excited to be here.
Great. Thank you so much for introducing yourselves. And next, do you think you can expound on your job, your office? What are their goals and, regarding to employment access opportunities?
Hello again. I am a little bit height challenged, so hopefully everyone can see me. So the New Jersey Division of Deaf and Hard of Hearing, their mission is to advance accessibility to all state programs and services, to provide education, awareness, advocacy. So we work on both sides. We work to help individuals who are deaf, hard of hearing, deaf blind, to provide information, resources, and advocacy to those groups. But then we also work with the entities and agencies and organizations to provide awareness and be an information resource for them as well. So we work with both groups. We also are a huge partner with the state government. We have several divisions and departments, and we partner with all of them. So for employment specifically, we have a wonderful relationship with the Department of Labor and the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation Services as well as other divisions such as the Division of Mental Health, Developmental Disabilities, Disability Services, the Commission for the Blind and Visually Impaired. So we all collaborate and work together for accessibility in general, but also for employment. Many times we have had deaf and hard of hearing and deaf blind consumers who call us and they ask for assistance, which, I can talk about that more in future questions along the way. But we also have businesses, agencies, and organizations who call us and they ask for help understanding what these things might entail, what we can provide, what accommodations would be necessary for working with different individuals. So we are able to educate them as well. And we consult with different organizations and we have different partnerships to make sure that we disseminate the information necessary to the right places.
So our organization, Hireability Vermont, our goal is to support people with a variety of disabilities in career advancement and career attainment, not just a good enough job and then calling it a day, but really encouraging people to explore careers. And that's across the board. Specific to our deaf and hard of hearing program, we want to make sure that our program is accessible for all deaf, hard of hearing, deaf blind participants. So we have a number of tools that we provide for accessibility. For example, we have an RCD program, our Rehab Counselor for the Deaf program. Those are folks who are deaf and who sign and can provide access for people. And so we provide that program for folks all over the state who are deaf and hard of hearing and deaf blind. If it's someone who is deaf blind, we work really closely with our sister organization, DBVI, which is the acronym for our deaf blind organization. And so they certainly are able to provide the expertise on the vision loss piece. Our RCDs can offer the expertise on the hearing loss piece, and we work together to give that person the best of both worlds, so to speak. So it's really, each case is individualized, and our RCDs work closely with new referrals to really understand their needs and assess their skills and to figure out a plan on an individual basis so that they can attain their goals and utilize a variety of tools. And I can talk more about the specific tools that we use at Hireability Vermont for employment later on.
You can go ahead and read the slides yourself. The next questions. So the first question is, how does your organization support deaf people with additional disabilities that have barriers or increasing barriers? I know you guys mentioned it a little bit with your partnerships and collaborations, but I want both of you guys to answer both of these questions, like, and also the collaborations with other agencies. What does that look like? How do you build on that? And how do you take advantage of those type of partnerships?
So our office is a very small office. We only have about 10 employees on our team. So part of our team, we have a deaf specialist. Their job is to provide information and referrals and to gather up different resources to provide the support necessary and break down those barriers. Employees often call us. And so we have this deaf specialist who gets calls, again, from people who are deaf, hard of hearing or deaf blind, or deaf with different additional disabilities, but also from different businesses and organizations and agencies who may not understand or just not be aware or just are unsure what to do. So awareness is the key, and knowledge also as well. So we have our deaf specialist who collaborates with other organizations, making sure all the resources are available, make sure they connect the agencies and businesses with who they need to. Our office also has several programs, and we help with becoming employable. For example, it's a little bit different than my colleague who is a specialist in employment. We have an equipment distribution program. So that includes assistive technology for individuals who are low income. The equipment is free and it is theirs. It's not a loaner program. Some states have what's called a loaner program, but we actually give them the equipment. It becomes their equipment. And that assistive technology helps some of our individuals with things like we might have an amplified phone or a caption telephone or equipment that just helps with amplification in general. Sometimes the equipment that might not be available in our program, but we have resources to get that equipment from elsewhere, can be also made available. Many times we might have people who are hard of hearing, and our office does serve both the community who uses sign language, but those who are hard of hearing who use speech as their primary mode of communication as well. So often we have individuals who are hard of hearing who call us, and they're unsure within their workplace how to use the phone system because they cannot hear on the phone. So that can be something that we can help lessen their anxiety when it comes to that. The fact that they can't hear on the phone in their place of employment. So we educate them on all of the various assistive technologies that are available to help with the issue with the phone. So that's not an issue. We are available and willing to assist with that. But I do need to back up a little bit because there's something that I'm very proud of in our office. We actually have a program that serves children birth to 5. And now you're probably wondering, how does that relate to employment? Why am I mentioning that in this setting? For children birth to 5, we have what's called a language education program. A language instruction program. So we provide sign language instruction for these children wherever they might be, whether it's in their classroom, whether they're in a childcare facility, whether they're at camp, whether they're at home. And the reason that is so important is that we are providing that valuable foundation for language development, which then leads to hopefully being successful in the K through 12 setting, potentially college, potentially a grad school or a trade school, and then employment. So when we start that young, then it leads to what we're talking about now. And so that is key, making sure there's all different pathways to get to where we need to be, which is our topic today. But I'm going to turn it over to my colleague with that.
So some of you may have already had experience with vocational rehabilitation programs. We are, and that whole process and basically figuring out folks' needs. We get referrals from people who are looking for work, and we then do an intake and have a conversation about their employment history and their skills and their goals, and potentially what their barriers might be and what they might need to kind of overcome those barriers and to get a sense of the person as a whole. After that, then we start working with the person to figure out a plan for employment, or we call that an IPE, an individualized plan for employment. So we work together to devise that plan. And then we partner with other agencies or resources, as Liz mentioned. And we partner with also a number of organizations. Vermont is a small state, and so many people have those networks. We know each other. Everyone knows each other. It's probably different than many places in New York. But one great thing is that we can easily partner and connect with folks in our networks to provide the services that we need. We have the Vermont Center for Independent Living, which is one of our partner agencies. So if a participant needs help with independent living skills, we can partner with VCIL to help with that. We have Deaf Vermonters Advocacy Services, or DVAS, and they can help folks who may be struggling in other realms of their life, and DVAS can help to advocate. We worked with the Department of the Blind and Visually Impaired, as I mentioned, to help folks who may have a vision loss, and again, with assistive technology and independent living skills. We also have a network of DS service providers in the state, and in Vermont, they tend to follow county. Each county has its own DS provider. So we worked with those and their services, potentially job coach and independent living support. And we may tag them in if we have a participant who is eligible for those services and can benefit from that support. So we try to also start early in that diagnosis and qualification process that tends to start in high school. But they have home and community-based supports and employment supports often that come within that system. You mentioned assistive technology. We also have an assistive technology program. I'm actually newly the director of our in-state assistive technology program, which was somewhat unexpected. So I'm trying to pick up that information and kind of catch up on that right now. But we do have the similar technology, as Liz mentioned, around captioning phones and computers and iPads. We also make sure that we can provide laptops for access to remote services, both interpreter and meeting. It can be difficult to find an in-person interpreter because there are not enough of them. And so having the ability to access interpreters remotely makes things a little easier. So we assess what the person needs and try to find the resources that are going to work for that person.
Fantastic. Thank you. This is Diego. I appreciate you sharing these points, and which segues nicely into the next question. So I'm actually going to combine the two questions. So you both... Yep. So the questions are asking, what systematic or communication barriers do deaf job seekers most commonly face in your experience? And please, also share what works well, right? And how do you see best practices applied to reduce those gaps or to mitigate the gap, right? What does that look like for you in the work that you do?
I think that's a great question. And that could be an entire day's discussion for sure. So I will try to just give a gist. I think the biggest barrier, in my view, is awareness. Many employees just don't know. Employers just don't know how to accommodate an individual or work with an individual who is deaf, hard of hearing, or deaf-blind. Especially a deaf individual who uses sign language to communicate, or an individual who is deaf who has an additional disability. It's just an area of being unaware. So one thing that my office does like to do We do it at least twice a month. We have deaf, hard of hearing sensitivity trainings. And that training is available to any organization that requests it. It is free of charge. We have now started offering it twice a month virtually, so any organization can log on. So we are just making it available for any of their staff members at any organization. It's a wonderful tool to spread awareness, to try to break down some of these myths, some of these things that people just don't know, to provide education. Working with deaf and hard of hearing individuals is something that can be done, something that they can do. And we are here to support them in that endeavor. We also are making sure that both the individuals and the organizations are more aware of the vocational rehabilitation services that we have, making them aware that there are counselors available in all counties in the state, specifically for those who are deaf and hard of hearing. So that is part of our partnership with the Department of Labor. We find those sensitivity trainings to be wonderful, a great benefit. We have organizations also that call with just questions, such as how to find an interpreter. Many times they're just not aware of interpreting services and what they might need to do. And they just need to take that first baby step. How do I find an interpreter? Where are the interpreters? What is an interpreter? They just don't even know. So our office will consult with them over the phone and give them all of the answers that they need. We will meet with them. We explain what interpreters are. Our office does have a directory of interpreters that are available, and that's available on our website. They can find that information. We have communication access services. So we will offer then to connect an organization with an interpreter to make sure that it meets their needs. Or we always tell them they can just contact an interpreter directly from that list if that's their preference. The list that we have, all of those interpreters are nationally certified. So people know that those interpreters on the list, we have verified that they are certified professionals. So the option is that we can help make a connection with a specific interpreter, or they can just look at the list and they can find an interpreter that way themselves. So we also provide information about what the ADA is, the Americans with Disabilities Act, and other resources to be able to educate them about that accommodation is not just something that's nice to provide, but it is actually part of our duty to provide accommodations. So I'll turn it over.
Thank you. So everyone obviously has a variety of communication needs. Everyone is individual. Some people use sign language. Some people use ASL in English. Some people speak for themselves. It really runs the gamut. So we do see folks who have barriers around communication, certainly. An example would be someone who maybe wants to go to a training or a college course, but the training center or the educational program feels like, oh, I don't know that we can afford the cost of interpreters. That is a big responsibility. And certainly that's something that we talk with. And VR in Vermont, we can't afford to pay for interpreters everywhere for everyone. But our job is to try to talk with them and negotiate with them. Sometimes we do offer to pay for interpreters initially with the agreement they will take that expense over. Sometimes we say, well, the ADA requires that you provide access, and this is access. And so it really depends on the situation. We also potentially look for other options. I know there was a situation with a program that said that they wouldn't be able to pay for interpreters because it would be an undue burden for them. And so in this situation, we talked with the consumer about their interest in the program, and it was a building and trades type of program. So we reached out to local businesses to try to work out what we call an OJT, or an on-the-job training. And so that the person could work at the business and we would provide interpreters and cover that cost, and they would get the training on the job and pick up the skills that they needed in hopes that they would be able to attain those certifications later. And so that was a situation that we tried, and we decided if that didn't work out, we would explore other options. So in that situation, that's how, a challenge became a success, or we hope it will be a success. Again, we have a number of different tools that I mentioned before to help with communication. So again, we have assistive technology that could help. We have the Vermont Center for Independent Living. They run the equipment distribution program in the state, EDP as we call it. And so if you qualify, again, it's an income-based program. So you can qualify for free computer equipment, communication devices. There is an application process, and then you can get free communication equipment. I believe that all states have a version of that program. It may be called different things, but that is another option in the state of Vermont. One other thing that I did forget to mention before is that we also have kind of an internal contractor, our CRP, we contract internally. They're called VABR, Vermont Association of Business and Industry Rehabilitation. And so they provide our job development services. And so that's for our participants, and we're really lucky to have them kind of in-house. They have space in our offices, and we partner really strongly with them. And so we work with VABR to provide those services. We actually have one staff member for VABR who actually signs. And so they work with our deaf and hard of hearing caseload and can provide those on-site services with employers to make sure folks can settle into employment and do really well. We have one young woman who was working at a printing company in the northern part of the state. And she is someone who uses ASL to communicate. And so there was some challenges in the workspace. So the VABR consultant was able to go and work with the team at her company. They hired interpreters, and they worked out a way to sometimes have interpreters. Sometimes they wrote notes back and forth. Sometimes they used their phone to kind of text back and forth. And they devised a system that worked really well for everyone, specifically around communication. And the VABR consultant was able to kind of help navigate that process for them. We also have under our VR program, we provide help with hearing aids for folks who are hard of hearing or have hearing loss. So we've worked with many people who work as teachers and nurses and other types of jobs where being able to hear is really important. So that's another place where we tie in and work closely with our AT, our assistive technology program, to provide specialized stethoscopes and phone equipment to make sure that people can access sound on their jobs the way that they need to. We also can help purchase those pieces of equipment if it's decided that that's a really important part of your job. So we've helped a number of people in that realm try out and purchase assistive technology.
Wow, thank you again. And for summarizing exactly what you do and the innovative equipment and technologies that you utilize to create this. So our time is running out a little bit. So we have about a little bit less than 10 minutes left. So maybe we could entertain maybe one or two questions from the audience for our panelists. Hold on one second Okay, go ahead. Oh, one of ours.
Thank you. Hi, sorry about the delay. I'm legally blind. So my question for you is, you were mentioning before about how as part of the job for the center, you have to work with other organizations, like, for example, Low Vision, which is helpful for me because I am deafblind. So it's important that the organizations collaborate. One of the big challenges I've had, and I work in the technology field, is that I'm working with people with very, very different communication styles, as there's a lot of diversity. Do you guys work with other organizations, not necessarily for different skills like vision and hearing, vision, like I mentioned, but maybe like a hard of hearing or deaf institution overseas, so that you can learn about other communication styles and then help the individuals work with different diverse people, because that's been one of the biggest challenges for me.
You first.
This is Will. Happy to go first. And if this doesn't answer your question, certainly let me know. I'm just trying to think here. Again, every situation is different. And so there's not one answer that would check all the boxes, but Vermont does have a program that helps youth if they are identified as having a hearing loss or other disabilities. They can, we contract with the Agency of Education to consult and help families and schools kind of learn about that student's needs and, if assistive technology would be helpful. Again, in an ideal world, everyone's needs would be recognized early and they would get what they need right off the bat. So it doesn't always happen. It's not a perfect system. But the hope is that that person would get what they need early on. And when they graduate high school, then they would be ready at that time to transition into, whatever it is that's next for them, and that they would have a good sense of all of their needs. And so that's where you would have the connections with Hireability or vocational rehabilitation in other states, or DBVI in Vermont, potentially getting folks ready for training or college or a trade or whatever it is where their interests lie. Does that answer your question?
Not exactly, but I can help you after.
Great, thanks.
And this is Laura. And just to add a little bit to what Will was just talking about, one of the things that we often share with at NDC, the people that we work with, deaf people, it's not a one size fits all. There's not just one way to be deaf, right? And I think that's really important to think about. So when you're working with deaf people, each deaf person will have a different accommodation preference. They'll know what works best for them. And in different environments, it can be different, right? So, they may have a particular interpreter for one thing, but they need something else for another environment. So just to reiterate that, I think, it's really important to think about that. Ask the deaf person, what works best for you? Is this working? What else can I do? So just another tidbit to add. Appreciate the question. Are there any more questions from the audience? Oh.
My name is Regina. I do have a question for you in New Jersey. You had mentioned there that there are businesses that reach out to your office for resources or consulting with you. I'm curious about those resources and how you share that with them specifically.
And how do they know to reach out to you?
Great question. There's a variety of ways. Sometimes they Google and find us. Sometimes they might see Department of Human Services social media account, because like I said, we are under the Department of Human Services, and they run their own social media. And so they might see us advertise there. Our office sometimes will have different videos, vlogs about our program. We will talk about our program on different social media platforms. We'll talk about interpreting services and hearing aid programs. We also, like Will had mentioned, that they have in Vermont, we have some hearing aid programs and the assistive technology programs. So sometimes they might see that and connect with us, but sometimes it's just word of mouth. Our deaf and hard of hearing sensitivity training has been very popular. These organizations that have taken it have loved it. So it's an opportunity for me to brag, because we have really gotten a lot of positive reviews about our sensitivity trainings. And a lot of times people hear about that from other organizations and then they reach out about that. And it's also through our sister agencies. They will say when they get a question, you know what, we don't know the answer to that. You need to connect with DDHH, the Division of Deaf and Hard of Hearing. So there are just a variety of ways that they hear about us.
I think we have time for one more.
Thank you. Cynthia Stewart from the New York State Office for New Americans. I wanted to ask about, do your offices support deaf individuals who are immigrants and refugees and use different sign languages. Our office in New York State has collaborated with some community-based organizations that are led by deaf New Americans or serve the deaf New American, meaning immigrant community. Thank you.
Liz is asking, Will, do you mind if I answer that? Okay, this is Liz. I am so thrilled to meet you, first of all. I love working with our Office of New Americans in New Jersey, which is one of our sister agencies. We are both under the Department of Human Services. We collaborate strongly when it comes to language access and language equity. We talk a lot about how to support deaf and hard of hearing individuals who come from other countries, who use a variety of different sign languages. I always love to say there are about 300 different sign languages worldwide. It's just a fun fact that I love to share with everyone that I meet, because often people will say, oh, I thought there was just one sign language. No, there are very, very many sign languages, just like there are very many spoken languages. And then on top of that, there's regional variations. We have accents. So I always love sharing that information with my audiences. So we do have a partnership, and we very much do try to support deaf and hard of hearing individuals who have come here from other countries. We support them in becoming part of the community in New Jersey. So yes, it's definitely something that we've been doing, and I'm thankful for the interest in that.
Okay, so Laura will take over next.
So this is Laura. I'm going to try my best to summarize this slide because I know we're running out of time. There's some of the key takeaways from this session. The gist of what this says is, what's been happening is not working. It's clearly not working. We need to evaluate the system and make the changes necessary and look deep into the data to figure out what the barriers are. And clearly it's not a Band-Aid. And clearly it's not a quick fix, right? We see people, they're like, oh, the deaf person showed up and I'm not sure what to do, right? So let's look at the system now to prevent that from happening in the future. And, and there are ways that we can do that. And there are ways that we can get ready for change. So, and please look at your connections, figure out what your partnerships are. We can't do it alone. It takes a village, and everyone needs to commit to the change, and everyone contributes to the change. And so I encourage you, while you're here at the symposium, to connect with one another, make the connections with the deaf folks here. You have a number of deaf experts right here that you can talk to. So please take the time to build those connections and resources. And I can't say it enough, please work together. And I think it's a fruitful endeavor to name what the barriers are. I mean, you can sweep it under the rug all you want, but let's name it, right? And we know it's not working, and how can we address it? For example, today the captions are very small. I will make that known to the conference planners, because hardly anybody can see those captions, right? So when we see things, name it, because people may not know. If we don't name it, you don't know. And how do we move forward? And I understand it wasn't unintentional, but these things happen and we can do better. It's no issue. We can do better. So hopefully you're leaving the session today with a couple of things to think about. I want to thank our panelists. Thank you for Christopher Woodfill for recommending these folks. I really appreciate your time. We here at NDC are here all day today and some of the morning tomorrow. If you have questions, please approach us. I really thank you for your time and attention. Thank you for coming.